In this video, you're about to witness the most intense debate yet.
I have to say, you're going to bark up the wrong tree if you think you're going to persuade a Brit that we should stop drinking alcohol because of people arriving in our country. I mean, that's not going to happen.
And which of your values are you most afraid to lose? Which ones are most threatened by
freedom
the
of
arrival
speech.
of refugees?
Freedom of speech. It's the first one.
You seem to almost suggest that they come to your countries with a lesser breed of values.
No, I don't think I said that at any point, and that's another time you've tried to put something in my
Well,
mouth. I've been in the Gulf for the last week or so. I see more burqas in my home city of London than I have seen in the Gulf in recent days.
Watch as Douglas Murray leaves a Muslim activist utterly speechless during a ferocious exchange in Doha. Despite the host's constant attempts to cut him off, Douglas Murray doesn't hold back and delivers responses that completely shut her down brutally. Stay tuned for the jaw-dropping moments. But first, let me tell you this debate promises to be highly contentious, particularly for Murray's supporters like me who adore him, as Douglas isn't just a speaker. He's a truth-teller who backs up his words with actual facts, and so, in this debate, you surely won't want to miss it. So, let's get started, but before, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, here is the first clip.
Douglas Murray, thank you very much. A few provocative thoughts, no doubt, that you mentioned there. A few jumped at me, such as when you said the developing world cannot move to the developed world. You seem to conveniently forget that the developed world moved to the developing world without asking permission.
No, I don't.
In this clip, we can clearly shows how she begins by challenging Murray's assertion about migration from the developing to the developed world, accusing him of ignoring historical colonialism, where the developed world moved to the developing world without consent. And hereby she sets the controversial tone to her conversation, on which Douglas denied, but she did not even listen to him, and continued stating,
It seems to me as well that this is a particularly Western-centric viewpoint, and a misleading one at that, because you know as well as I do, and the figures show it, 85% of the world's refugees, in fact, settle in neighboring countries in the Middle East,
Sure.
in Africa and Asia. They do not rush over to Europe.
Sure. You'd make a big mistake if you think I hadn't heard of colonialism.
You don't seem to address it in any
I'd
way.
also suggest, by the way, that I don't know how long we're going to go on about colonialism for. I'm happy to do it as long as you like, but let me
you
just...
have to be factful, though.
After all her accusations, Douglas could not hold back any longer and responded by retaliating against her. He first responded about the issue of colonization, but suggested leaving the topic. Here he is why people love and want to see Douglas more and more, as he not only refuses to talk about something, but in a much deeper sense, if we look closely, despite Lady's various attempts to steer the conversation back to historical grievances, Murray redirects the discussion towards a more pragmatic and solution-oriented approach. However, the host did not stop there. She again said something ridiculous, upon which Douglas taught her the lesson in just a minute. Have a look.
Well,
Don't we have to be
but also don't
careful about
think, if I may say so, that colonialism was just a Western thing. What was one of the largest and most significant empires in history but the Ottoman Empire? Do we say that Turkey has to do something like the West to deal with
That's
this?
not the issue. You
brought up colonialism.
Now she attempts to shift all responsibility to Western nations to deal with the migrant crisis. But the thing here to understand is that the lady is apparently against European and Western culture, and throughout she clearly favors people from the Islamic world. To add more about her, she is a Lebanese journalist. Now let's face it, people like her often view Western liberal culture with disdain, considering it degenerate and pornographic. Many Muslims see the West as morally corrupt, promoting sexual promiscuity, secularism as theses, all of which are not aligned with their Islamic values. And in the debate, there is the moment it happened when the host said something which is intolerable at any time.
You're not asking people with other traditions whether they care about the sight of people drinking alcohol or going up in bikinis. Again, it's a very
we could in Britain
Western-centric viewpoint.
Douglas straight up wasn't having any of it.
I'm not. I have to say, you're going to bark up the wrong tree if you think you're going to persuade a Brit that we should stop drinking alcohol because of people arriving in our country. I mean, that's not going to happen. These things are all a bit of give and
you
take.
bring your own traditions that don't quite fit with theirs.
Well,
they don't.
Yeah, there are, as I said, and before we got all confrontational, which you did from the get-go, I said what the problem is here is that these things are all rubbing against each other. And in that situation, you have to work out what things you're willing to give up, which things you're willing to compromise on, and which ones you're not. You're not going to persuade the Brits to massively change their culture.
I also agree with Douglas, and everyone should also start accepting it. Let's think in a way, for instance, if I start living in another place, I do not expect people there to live according to my beliefs or to change their moral ethics for me. How can anyone even demand that? Even I strongly believe they shouldn't even be called refugees because refugees are people who flee their home country to escape persecution, war, or violence. In Narede reality, many of them should be called as invaders intend to stay. And we can also see an instance in a debate where one of the panelists, an anti-Europe activist, questioned,
We call brown people migrants. We call white people who go abroad to work expats. This is really important. Right.
Upon which Douglas have said something that didn't debunk all the claims, but it certainly made us all think.
Firstly, by the way, migrants versus expats, there's a very clear reason. It's expected, rightly or wrongly, that expats don't stay in the country and bring up their families and stay for generations. The assumption with migrants is, currently has been in recent generations, that they are going to stay and that it's going to be a multi-generational thing. That's the assumption.
The harsh reality is that these migrants falsely claim refugee status to stay in our countries for years, and after settling, they bring their families, exploiting generosity. It is a high time not for all of us, but for our governments that they must highly start thinking to stop such lax immigration policies and crack down on those abusing asylum systems to protect national resources and integrity. Now let's come to the heart of the matter.
You brought up colonialism.
You are talking about the Western view that they should stay where they belong.
I'm saying that it seems to me to be much wiser that if you have a very large humanitarian crisis in, for instance, Syria, you try to make sure that people remain in the area. This isn't say all of them, but it is more likely. I absolutely agree they do. I've seen it firsthand.
Look at Turkey, 3.5 million refugees. Look at Lebanon and Jordan per capita.
What
the
I'm
countries that have
suggesting
the most.
to you
In
is,
fact, in Lebanon, you've got 1 in every 4 person living in that country is a Syrian refugee.
Absolutely.
So to suggest they're not doing very much is just being misleading, being dishonest.
Believe me, I'm not being misleading. And I said from the outset that I agree with the point that most refugees remain in the area. And I said that I think that that's a good idea. I'm suggesting to you that I think it's better that people, for instance, fleeing Syria, end up in the countries around Syria in order to be able to return to their country than putting them in Norway.
But they will return. You are suggesting that they don't want to return. Who in their right mind, if they had the option,
when did I say that?
And we will hear from a refugee, if they had the option to return, of course they'd want to return.
I didn't say they wouldn't.
They leave everything behind.
In the whole, we can clearly see how she constantly accuses him of being misleading and dishonest, suggesting that Douglas underestimates these countries' efforts. However, Murray calmly refutes the accusation, asserting that he acknowledges and agrees that most refugees remain in neighboring countries. He emphasizes that his argument is based on practical considerations, advocating for refugees to stay closer to their home countries to facilitate their eventual return. Then after she is not done embarrassing herself yet, watch this next clip.
It wouldn't just be the Italians. Now, the Italians, by the way, and let me just finish this point.
That's a valid issue, but let me respond to it.
Let me finish the
states
point.
Of the region, it's a valid issue, but unlike the European countries, allow me to just make this point, unlike the European countries,
I'll respond to 2 points.
They are not parties to the 1951 Refugee Convention. So the legal obligations are, well, it's just a fact.
Conveniently, isn't it?
But I'll let you carry on.
But this means that countries that are signatories to the refugee conventions get more blame and more assumption that they are going to have to hold more of the burden than countries that didn't. And I'm suggesting to you that nobody should be able to absolve themselves from blame. But if you go to Italy now, and I don't know when you were last there, but it is not the case that this is going well in Italy, either for the migrants who are arriving or for the Italian population.
Isn't it because the resources are not being poured into this? Let's face it, the policies are not there, the resources aren't there.
I see these people when they arrive, I follow their stories. It is not the case just that they don't, the local populations in Italy I've been to Lampedusa, I've seen the boats coming in. The local populations are extremely generous. They are extremely kind to the people. Most of the populations in Europe, let's just not have this idea that Europeans are somehow incredibly cold-hearted. Countries in Europe have taken in a lot of people, and they are trying to deal with a very big problem very swiftly.
Throughout this segment, it is noticeable that the host frequently interrupts Murray as he attempts to provide a nuanced response, especially when Murray is trying to elaborate on his points about Britain's diversity and inclusivity. Despite the interruptions, Murray manages to assert that blaming Europeans for being unsympathetic or ungenerous towards migrants is unfair and inaccurate. His perspective aims to provide a balanced view amidst the contentious debate surrounding migration policies in Europe. Now, how will you feel if someone challenges you about your values, questioning whether your beliefs, traditions, and virtues are being compromised by others who come with their own set of values and traditions? This was exactly what happened during the debate when the lady posed a question.
Because much of your argument, Douglas, seems to be about the us versus them, the fact that, we have our own values, our own Britishness, our own virtues, and they will come to our shores with their values, their traditions. You seem to almost suggest that they come to your countries with a lesser breed of values.
And Douglas, without giving it a thought, made very clear.
No, I don't think I said that at any point, and that's another time you've tried to put something in my mouth.
So when you talk about the difference in values, what do you suggest?
Look, first of all, I didn't say that. I said that there are challenges because we do know that there are challenges, and let's just be frank about this. I mean, for instance, I've been in the Gulf for the last week or so. I see more burqas in my home city of London than I have seen in the Gulf in recent days, certainly here in Doha. Now, I can't say I'm delighted by the sight of more and more burqas in London. Do I feel any hatred of the people who wear them? Of course not. Of course not. But I can't say I'm elated by it. And definitely there are times I think, what percentage of burqas in this area becomes like not that pleasant for everyone else?
But again, is it all down to burqas? Because again, you're not asking people with other traditions whether they care about the sight of people drinking alcohol or going up in bikinis. Again, it's a very
we could in Britain
Western-centric viewpoint.
I'm not. I have to say, you're going to bark up the wrong tree if you think you're going to persuade a Brit that we should stop drinking alcohol because of people arriving in our country. I mean, that's not going to happen. These things are all a bit of give and take.
You bring your own traditions that don't quite fit with theirs.
Well,
they don't.
Yeah, there are, as I said, and before we got all confrontational, which you did from the get-go, I said what the problem is here is that these things are all rubbing against each other. And in that situation, you have to work out what things you're willing to give up, which things you're willing to compromise on, and which ones you're not. You're not going to persuade the Brits to massively change their culture, but let me just make the point. Every single society has certain aspects of it doesn't want to give up.
And even now, this debate is about to reach its boiling point, and you can imagine when Douglas himself, irritated, remarked, "That would be a very dishonest way to represent this debate."
Let me just make the point. Every single society has certain aspects of it doesn't want to give up. This one will. In Qatar, this one will. Everyone does. So please don't try to make this a kind of bigoted European thing. That would be a very, very dishonest way to... That would be a very dishonest way to represent this debate.
Just answer this question directly if you can. Which of your values are you most afraid to lose? Which ones are most threatened by the arrival of refugees?
Freedom of speech. It's the first one.
Now, as Douglas has rightly pointed out, freedom of speech is a cornerstone value in the UK and across the West, and it's a value that he believes is most threatened by the influx of refugees. His concerns are not unfounded. Yet for those who hastily dismiss these concerns as fear-mongering, he made the crucial point.
That's not a problem?
I mean...
You think that's not a problem?
But
you think... Sorry, no. Let me pick up on that. Let me pick up on that. It's very easy to snigger. It's very easy to snigger about this until you've had friends shot in a newspaper office. It's very easy to laugh about that until it's happened to people you know.
Absolutely right. The Charlie Hebdo incident in Paris quickly comes to mind for many, and Douglas rightly said freedom of speech is crucial to the foundational principles of our country. It is enshrined as a fundamental right, essential for fostering open discourse, challenging authority, and safeguarding democracy. We individuals are generally free to express our opinions and engage in controversial discussions without fear of persecution. And let me tell you, none of the Islamic countries in the world adhere to the European or US standards of free speech. According to the International Human Rights Rank Indicator, nearly all Muslim-majority nations, with the exception of the United Arab Emirates, score below 53%. This starkly contrasts with the significantly higher scores seen in free democratic countries. This disparity underscores the incompatible viewpoints between Western nations, where free speech is closely tied to human rights, and many Islamic countries, where restrictions on speech are often influenced by cultural and religious norms. And now, guys, it's high time we all stood up and demanded change and secure our rights. What are your thoughts on this? Should Europe continue to accept so many refugees? Let us know in the comments section.